And embroidery is so beautiful in that it allows us to sit together and create community with one another. The other beautiful thing about embroidery is almost like writing with stitches.
Hello and welcome to Art Restart, where we learn from artists who, wherever they work, whatever they make, are shaking up the status quo in their fields and in their communities. I'm Pier Carlo Talenti, the producer and editor of this podcast, a production of the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. In this episode, we'll be speaking with fiber artist Maria Amalia Wood. Maria is the creator of Unidas por Hilos, which in English translates to United by Threads. Unidas por Hilos is a community of Latina immigrants who come together on a monthly basis to embroider, while also building a supportive community. The group is only the latest of similar workshops or groups that Maria has created in the past that use art making to create inclusive and supportive spaces for Latina immigrants to showcase their cultural heritage and share their stories. Born in Honduras and raised in her native country as well as in Madison, Wisconsin, where she currently lives, Maria has for decades linked her own art making to the fostering of fellowship and opportunities among Latina women. In her first job straight out of college, she traveled to Nicaragua every 2 to 3 months to help a workshop of local women make beaded products for the U.S. market. She then went on to create a new program funded by the Honduran government to work with indigenous Lenca women to expand their handicraft traditions and create embroidered products for the international market. And after that, she joined Serve International, a nonprofit that since 1949 has been fighting global poverty through fair and ethical trade, and she worked for them for several years. Maria spoke to me from Lighthouse Christian Academy in Madison, where she teaches K-8 art. I started off by asking her how she developed this passion for community art making while she was also training herself to become the artist she is today.
So since I was little, I been surrounded by textiles. My grandmother had boutique that made wedding dresses in Honduras. That's where I'm from. I was born and raised in Honduras, and most of my childhood was spent with my grandmother because she was the one who took care of me while my parents would work. And so she had this sewing workshop that had about 30 women working for her making wedding dresses. And I grew up surrounded by lots of fabric and all the cacophony of noises that were made during 30 women talking, 30 women being with each other. And in Honduras, and I don't know, it's similar actually in other countries too, but in Honduras, when you're working, you always have music on, at least in certain workplace spaces. And I remember these women would have these romantic songs, Spanish songs playing in the background, and there was all this conversation happening, and some of them would teach me how to sew basic stitches. And back then, the sewing machines were like pedal machines, manual pedal machines, and other women would take me and teach me how to glue beads on the wedding dresses. And so it was such a beautiful memory. But what stayed with me from that memory was the community that was happening while they were making something with their hands. And so I always start with that because I believe that my interest in textiles and fiber arts, I think, was born from early on because of those memories. And so when I got my MFA in fiber arts, I was mostly focusing on paper making, but I was also still very much interested in using art as a way to create community.
So then tell me, how did all your professional experience working with communities abroad lead you to create Unidas por Hilos?
One thing has led to the other. After Serve, I ended up going to get my MFA in design studies. I focused in fiber arts, and for my thesis project, I was still very much interested in working with communities. And so I ended up with another artist friend. We both did a project called Soñé una Milpa, where we interviewed 10 Latina immigrant women from my community about their immigration journeys. They were just going to come to my house and we were going to ask them questions, but then they came with the initiative of like, why don't you come to my house and I'm going to cook for you a meal from my country. And over that meal, we'll discuss the questions.
Hmm.
This was something that came from them. And so we were really excited about that. So we went to all of these women's homes. They made a meal for us from their country. And that was very beautiful because it kind of served as an icebreaker to share a very vulnerable story because they were sharing very vulnerable stories with us. And that project I fell in love with. And then after that, I wanted to continue to do projects that focused on the Latina immigrant experience. And so after that project, I was given the opportunity to do an art residency in a library called Penny Library, and I focused that residency on paper making. And I invited the community to make paper with me and pulp paint the paper to create a sunset that was informed by our journeys, regardless of where you came from. We could find common ground through the sharing of our journeys. So when all these people were making all of these paper squares, I ended up bringing them home and I collaged them, and then I invited women, again, a group of Latina immigrants to come to my house. Again, these are women from my own community who I know. And I asked them, do you want to help me embellish this piece that I'm working on, which is about journeys? And I would love to continue to talk about our journeys as immigrants. So these women came to my house, and they would come to my house and we would just sit in my living room and we would embroider these paper pieces, and I would tell them, just if you could think about your journey, your life journey, how would you stitch that journey as a path, on a piece of paper? And so they would all create different kinds of paths, different kinds of stitches. Again, I was teaching them how to embroider as well because many of them did not know how to embroider. After they embroidered the pieces, then I assembled the entire thing together as a paper horizon, a 5 foot by 5 foot piece.
And I'm guessing you displayed it somewhere.
Yep, it's permanently, it's part of the Penny Library's permanent collection. So it's there. So if you ever come to Madison, you can go and see it
That's amazing. So
there.
tell me what it was like when the women who had made the piece first saw it displayed.
Oh, they were just in awe, right? To see it framed because it was framed and it was hung, and they did like a special unveiling for the piece. And so they just felt so proud to be part of this project. And at the end, when we finished embroidering, some of the women came to me and said, can we continue to meet and embroider and do this? Because they just loved it. So immediately after that residency, I got an opportunity for another one at Synergy Co-working in Madison. And I proposed to them a project called Bordando Memorias, which means embroidering memories. And that project I proposed so that we can continue to meet as a group and embroider. And I said, I want to create a collective of Latina immigrant women who come together to create art and community. And they loved the idea. And so I formed this group and I invited not only the women who had been part of the previous project, but I opened it up to the entire Madison community. We put flyers in all the libraries, and anyone who identified as a Latina immigrant was welcome to come. The groups were in Spanish. We met on a monthly basis, and over about 30 women ended up participating, but we had a core of about 12 to 15 women who always came.
Latina immigrant is one demographic group, but of course there's a lot of different cultures
Yes.
under that umbrella. What was it like for different cultures to intermingle? Were there surprising things for you or for the participants?
Well, I think one of our favorite parts of this whole of our meetings was the food. um,
Right.
the part of the
Yeah, because
proposal,
culture is clearest in food making,
yeah,
definitely,
like,
and
like
music and food making.
yes,
Yeah,
music and food is always part of
yeah.
our culture too. And that's why with that first project that I talked about, they invited us in their homes and cooked a meal for us. It's like food is
Mm.
so integrated into everything we do in our culture. And so when I proposed the project to to Synergy, I asked them as part of the budget to have money so that I could purchase Latin American food from Latin vendors in Madison. And I would be bringing that food for every meeting. And so I would always be bringing, food from different Latin American countries for each meeting. And we would just gather around this food and talk and just catch up. And then we would move into another room where we would embroider. But it was just so much fun to just eat and just share, almost like a little party.
Sure. Well, which brings me to my next question. Just the experience of gathering monthly to share food and stories has great impact. What do you think is particularly important about the art making aspect of your meetings? Why is it so crucial?
Specifically embroidery. So embroidery is an art form that has been used in Latin America for centuries, right? And so it's a craft that we can all connect to, all of us. If you ask any of these women, they'll have memories, that relate to embroidery. Oh, my grandma used to embroidery. Oh, I remember in school they taught us embroidery. And so embroidery is something very much embedded in our in our memories. And so embroidery is also a very, very slow process. And it allows us to pause. It allows us to be present. It allows us to stitch. And while we're stitching, we can talk at the same time and have really meaningful conversations during this art form that is very slow. And it gives us that time and it gives us that space to just share with one another. Other art forms are not as slow and it requires a different kind of attention. And embroidery is so beautiful in that it allows us to sit together and create community with one another. The other beautiful thing about embroidery is almost like writing with stitches or drawing with stitches. And so food is wonderful, but it's very ephemeral. You eat it and then it's done, it disappears. All that stays is a memory. But with embroidery attached to that experience, it allows us to almost document and preserve that meal that we just had and shared with one another. It preserves our experiences, if that, and it lasts longer than a meal would.
What's been the most useful or surprising piece of feedback you've heard from one of your participants?
Well, if it's okay with you, I wanted to share a quote from one of our participants, and
Oh, sure.
I wanted to share it in Spanish first because it sounds way better in Spanish because Spanish is just
Sure. And then
such a
you'll give us a
beautiful language, and
translation.
then I'll give you a translation.
Oh, awesome.
So
Thank you.
this is by Rosie, and Rosie has been a part of this embroidery journey since the beginning, and this is what she shared. This is her quote in Spanish first. Me encanta esta actividad porque mientras bordo, hago volar mis pensamientos al pasado y medito en los bellos y malos momentos entre mi país y esta nueva cultura. Pero en cada puntada que avanzo, me digo, no importa dónde esté, ahí me abriré camino, lo vestiré de colores y lo alimentaré con las experiencias de mis compañeras. La experiencia de bordar es nueva para mí, como tantas cosas nuevas que he experimentado en esta cultura. No es fácil bordar y no es fácil vivir lejos del lugar donde nacemos. Cuando veo el trabajo terminado, digo, no fue fácil, pero lo logré y se ve bello. Pero lo más valioso son las experiencias compartidas entre el grupo y darme cuenta de que no importa qué tan lejos estemos, ni qué tan difícil sea, aquí también haremos historia y brillaremos. And this is the English translation. I love this activity because while I embroider, my thoughts travel back in time, and I reflect on both the beautiful and difficult moments between my country and this new culture. But with each stitch, I remind myself no matter where I am, I will make my way. I will dress my journey in colors, and I will nourish it with the experiences of my companions. Embroidery is new to me, just like so many things I have encountered in this culture. It is not easy to embroider, just as it is not easy to live far from the place where we were born. But when I see the finished work, I tell myself, it wasn't easy, but I did it, and it looks beautiful. And the most valuable part is the experiences shared within the group. The realization that no matter how far we are or how hard it gets, here, too, we will make history and shine.
Oh, it must be so edifying for you. You must be
Yeah,
so proud. Yeah.
I am. It's a powerful, very powerful quote. And it's a reminder that art is more than just an activity. It is a tool for building community, connection, and a sense of belonging for all of us.
It also makes me wonder if, because these are crucial stories that are being told in a visual stitchwork manner, is there an archive being made of these?
You know, for the Creando Arte y Comida project that we're currently doing right now, which is we're sharing meals with one another, we're teaching each other how to make the meal and inviting the community to come and eat our meals. The second phase for this project is to create an embroidered recipe book for these meals. And then we're going to digitalize the book so that it's accessible to anyone who has access to the internet. And so that I think is going to be our first time that we're going to be
So
documenting
this is a
our
brand new
work.
project you're kicking off.
Yes. So right now, as we speak, we're meeting every month, once a month, and one of our members of our group, which is now called Unidas por Hilos, but before it was Bordando Memorias, each of these women are teaching us how to make a meal from their home country. And the community, the Madison community, is invited to come. Anyone can come. You just have to register in advance. And then we're just sharing this meal, and the woman that's presenting her meal is sharing her story. And so our hope is that after we're done with the meal portion of this project next fall or this coming fall, we're gonna start meeting together again as just as our group, just the Unidas Burrito group, to embroider those recipes and to embroider the images that come to our minds through those recipes. And then we're going to be scanning all of these pages or cloth pages, and then we're going to create a digital book of it. But we're also going to create an artist book, a tangible artist book. It'll just be one, but we're hoping to, have an exhibition for it, and along with a digital version of the book and a video that documents the whole process.
Oh, fantastic idea. So I wonder if in the last couple of months, the conversations have changed at all, given a number of edicts coming from Washington. What are you hearing from members, whether they're documented or not, about what they're feeling? Has there been a change in attendance or a change in what's being discussed?
There's definitely been a lot of fear and uncertainty. And more than fear, I think it's more uncertainty. Some of these women are kind of in limbo as to what's going to happen. So they don't know what's going to happen. But, our meetings are not spent focusing on that. Our meetings are very joyful meetings. Our meetings are just a time for us to take a deep breath and leave everything from the outside world behind. This becomes our world, and we get to define what happens inside our own little group. And so when we're together, we make a conscious decision for that space and that time to be a celebration of us. And when we celebrate ourselves, it's just a time of joy for all of us, right? And yes, there's been times where some of them have cried, and there's been times when some of them are going through really challenging times. But what we're living through right now in this political environment, it's not the first challenge that we've ever faced, right? Like these
Right.
women are resilient. They have
Yes.
gone through so
Talk about
much.
journeys. Yeah.
Yes. So
Hmm.
this is not, this is just one thing happening, but these women will push through this because, or all of us, we're resilient women. It's not going to hold us down. Me particular personally, it makes me feel very sad. I didn't know that there were so many people who who don't want us, who don't welcome us, and because of a piece of paper. And so that makes me very sad. It makes me feel all unwelcomed. In fact, I had been telling my husband the other day, we were talking about that, and I said, I really miss being in Honduras and just feeling home, feeling like I don't have to have anything to prove myself in this country because this is my home, Honduras. And he asked me, do you feel home now here? And my answer was, well, home isn't just a place anymore. It's home for me now. It's where I've developed deep connections. And for example, home is when I'm at work and I'm surrounded by all my amazing coworkers and students. I get the privilege to work at a school that is over 80% Hispanic identifying students. And the majority of my coworkers are also from Latin American countries. So when I say that I feel at home at work is because I'm literally surrounded by people who speak my language and understand my culture. I also feel at home with the women at Unidas por Hilos because we connect through art, we connect through meals, we connect through our stories and our stitches. And I also feel at home when I'm cuddling in bed with my husband and my two kids, and especially my golden retriever. So even though home in the outside world, it's a hard concept to define, it's very easy for me to define it when I'm with those people who I know how to connect with.
Hmm. What's you have your own immigrant story. What's been the most surprising thing you've learned through Unida por Hilos about other immigrant stories?
It's funny because I struggled with connecting with Americans, even though I'm married to an American, very much white man from Michigan. And I've been part of this culture for, like I said before, over 28 years. Yet I've still had a really hard time connecting with people. I'm not alone in that. If you ask these women, they will say that for them one of the hard things is not the physical wall in the border, it's the invisible walls between us here in our communities, these invisible walls that keep us separated from one another. We are in a little bubble, and the others are in a little bubble, and how do we break our bubbles so that we can connect with one another? And for me, I always thought it was my lack of understanding of humor, of American humor. And I always thought I was not a funny person because, I wasn't witty enough, or I wasn't sarcastic enough, or I just simply I never understood American jokes. And so I thought maybe that's why I can't connect. But I am a funny person when I speak in Spanish.
No, it's true. You
you
just made me think that along with food and music, there's
know?
nothing as culturally specific as humor, actually.
Yes, the humor is so wonderful. And
Yeah.
when I'm with these women at Unidas por Hilos, all that humor that I haven't been able to understand in the American culture just comes back, and I'm like, I am a funny person, and I understand jokes because these women are just funny, and we laugh, and I understand what they're saying, and I understand the context surrounding their humor as well, and so when I was in my MFA program, I was once told, you need to find your people here. You need to know who your people are. That always stayed with me everywhere I went. I'm like, who are my people? And for me, one of the most beautiful things that have resulted from Unidas por Hilos, or this collective of women embroiderers, is that I have finally found my people. They are the women that I can connect with and I can laugh with and just be myself.
You mentioned these invisible bubbles that made it hard for you and many of your friends to connect in this culture. How would you like artists of all types, whether immigrants or not, to pop those bubbles? In what
Yeah.
way can artists do that kind of work?
You know, I always tell other people, who ask a similar question, I said, just come and eat with us. Come and share a meal with us. Listen to our stories. Listening is so important because when somebody stops and gives you attention, just like you are doing, right? You're interested in my story. It makes me feel that what I have to share is important to you. And so for someone else to ask an immigrant to share their story over a meal, I think it makes them feel validated and heard. Also, I've seen, some artists creating work about immigration, but I think it's also important to create work with immigrants.
Hmm.
Why not give them that opportunity? And when I say that, it's not about just creating participatory art projects where you're inviting them to be part of your project, which is what I've been doing sometimes, like Viajes del Horizonte was participatory in nature. I led the whole entire thing, right? I was the one with the idea and I just taught them how to make paper and then they pole painted, but there wasn't much choice for the participant in that project, which it's not a bad thing because that was the nature of the project. But I think as artists, it would be also good to create projects that are more collaborative. And for me, collaboration is when where everybody invited into that project is sharing ideas from the start so that the project is not a project owned by one person, but it's a project owned by everyone in the group and where everybody's creative contribution holds equal value. And I think that's been something very important for me to continue to reflect on after every project to say, what kind of project do I want this to be? Do I want this to give space for the women to be co-collaborators on this? Or do I want this project to be something where they just come and make a mark? And so for me, Unidas por Hilos is a collaborative project versus Bordando Memorias was more limited in terms of choice for the women, because I was the one who drew their portraits. I was the one who created the drawing, right? They were the ones who said, these are the flowers that I want on my portrait. And they were the ones who embroidered it. But how much choice? It's almost like when I'm teaching students K through 8, when I'm planning my lessons, I'm always asking myself, how much choice, how much creative voice will students have in this lesson? And for me, I think there's room for both because sometimes the students just need to focus on skill where creativity is not as important. But then when they've obtained that skill, I think it's very important to give them room for creative voice. And so now that the women know how to embroider aronidas o porilos, now it's a good time for them to share their own creative voice. So when we do the embroidered recipe book, I will be there providing guidance if they need it. But my goal for that embroidered book is for them to design their own cloth page, right?
Mm,
However they want to
right,
do it, with
right.
whatever stitches they want to make. And so for me, that process is a successful process is when you're and when the process is ending in 100% creative voice for that person who's participating in the project. So yeah, so when artists are doing projects with immigrants, perhaps part of the project is teaching skill, but to always have room for sharing the voice of the immigrant's voice because it's a voice that is often unheard and invisible.
If you'd like to read a longer version of this interview and learn more about Maria, just head to uncsa.edu/artrestart. Our theme music is by Shanghai Restoration Project. I'm Pier Carlos Lenti, and on behalf of the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, thank you for listening.